Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. My name's Terry and I am the Shieldmaiden in the kitchen. And today I am back fresh from my travels in Viking territory in Iceland and Scotland and England. And of course I picked up a new Viking shirt, so that was fun. And I might post some stuff from my trip, so look forward to later videos. But today it is a gray day in the Pacific Northwest, and I for one am super happy that somebody finally turned down the volume on the sun. I am ready for summer to be over. It's September and we are headed into fall. You can kind of see it on the horizon and I'm definitely looking forward to it. And today I've got a super sweet treat for you because I am going to do a kind of fall time harvest sort of activity, and that is I'm going to take honey off the hive. And of course, there's going to be history involved because honey is definitely something that the Vikings would have used if they could get a hold of it, as with all medieval people and even as with all ancient people as well, because for most of human history, honey was one of the major sweeteners if, again, people could get a hold of it. Before cane sugar became a thing. And so if you followed me on my Instagram, which is Shieldmaiden PDX, you will have probably seen some video or pictures of my bees. A couple of hives in the backyard, and the bees got moved a couple 3 weeks ago to our farm, and they're very happy out there. And now it's time to take some of the honey off of at least one of the hives. There's several frames that are pretty full, and so we're going to get some fresh honey today. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea about how this works. This is a honey spinner, and we'll put this together, but our hive box over here has some frames in it, and we'll be taking those, putting them on the spinner and giving that a whirl so that we can take advantage of centrifugal force, and then that force will of course dump everything down into that nice stainless steel vat. Of course Vikings didn't have a nice stainless steel vat, they used a different grade of stainless steel. Haha, history joke. But we will get as much off of this as we can, and then also because of what will be left over from the cells from the frame, we'll have that nice wax, and we can even melt that down and make some candles. So this is a really great sustainable activity, and of course honey is really good for you. It's definitely known as a superfood for lots of reasons, which you can Google. But anyway, so stay tuned. Let's put things together here and let's get spinning. Okay, so here's our hive box, and you can see we have several frames in here. This is actually pretty heavy because of all the honey that we have in here. And we've got our neat little beekeeper tools. Basically, the brush we already used just to kind of make sure that there's no bees in here, so we're safe. And then we've got a tool here to grab and lift the frame out, and one to kind of pry them out because, as you might imagine, it's honey, it's sticky, and these things really kind of get stuck in here. I mean, you can tell even just by me pulling on that one like that, it's like really stuck in there pretty good. So we'll feel around, see if there's some that are kind of loose. That one's popped up a bit, maybe that will work. Let's see, just pry a little bit, see if we can kind of move it around. There we go. All right, and then put our little grabbers in there and pull. Okay, there you go. So you can see this is full of honey, and over here you can kind of maybe see a little bit of the glistening where the honey is not capped off like it is over on this side. So that's all covered and capped with wax. This is going to come out pretty easily with the spinner, but this I will actually need to take a heated knife and sort of slice off that wax in order to open up those cells so that the honey will come out pretty easily. But you can see the other side also pretty darn full. So let's go ahead and get ready to put this in the spinner and get some honey. I've assembled the spinner, and you can see the wire rack that's down on the inside that's going to hold the frames, and got my handle attached and You see, it's very, very basic technology. Just a nice crank handle in order to get the spinning going fast enough so that the centrifugal force will expel the honey from the frames. And then once it drips down into the vat, it does have this opening at the bottom, which you can secure, you can see with this little nut here. So if I unloosen that, and then you just simply go like that, and boop, there's the hole where the honey will come out. So I've got it kind of secured here with some foil and a towel underneath, just so that it kind of stays closed and we don't get honey all over the place. But so look, now we see a casualty, a little bee, dead bee that came from this hive. But I'm going to lift 3 of these out, and as I mentioned, I'm going to come over to the sink and we're going to cut the wax off of some of these cells right here. I have just a regular thermos that's got some boiling hot water in it, and I've just been resting this knife in there so that it gets nice and hot, because that way it will slice through really easily. And so once we get that taken off of there, then we can put it into the spinner and situate it down on that wire rack. Okay, so I've got our first frame, and I'm going to take the knife that I've had sitting in boiling water so it's nice and hot. And you'll see, you can tell by the lighter color here that this is the capped off waxed cells. And of course we need to remove that so that they're open like the cells over here, and the honey can come out in the spinner. And when you heat the knife up like this, and some beekeepers actually even have, like, electric knives that are, you can just plug in and keep them hot, but I'm just using some boiling water. You get the knife nice and hot, and that way, of course, it just melts it sort of, or softens it anyway, as you cut through, and it makes it so that it's easy then to get the caps off. And I've got a plate down below just as a receptacle so we can make sure and capture the wax, because again, I mean, we can use the wax, you can make candles or use it for other things as well. And so we will continue to just do this on 3 of the frames because our honey spinner will fit 3 frames at a time, and then that way we'll be able to get off as much as possible for our capacity. And I think we've got maybe about 12 or 15 frames, so we're going to get a fair amount of honey off of this particular harvest. And I showed you that little dead bee. Just, a note about that bee. We're talking about the European honeybee, and this is the bee that is responsible for basically the honey you get that is in North America. We don't have, I mean, there's so many different types of bees, different species of bees, like literally thousands, but it is the European honeybee that's the little workhorse that, does a lot of the pollinating for the fruits and vegetables that are grown in North America. We have a commercial beekeeper who keeps some hives on our farm during his off season, and the off season is when, the bees have been traveling around the country, literally going to farms. A big one is the almond growers in California, and they'll, take the honeybees down there and truck them and get them into those fields so that they can pollinate those trees and we can have almonds. So, I mean, in the past few years, many of you have probably seen in the news that there's issues with bees and things like colony collapse disorder. And so the bees are really amazing, really delicate little creatures, but they're so important to our survival. But this European honeybee has only been in North America, since European exploration began around 500 years ago. And so again, this would have been the bee, that would have been providing things for medieval Europeans and people like the Vikings for sure. All right, so I'm going to continue to remove the wax from these frames, and then we will get them situated into the spinner and get ready to make some honey. All right, the last of the frames, and you can see most of that is open, and there is the very obvious part that I just opened with the hot knife. And so all of that honey is ready to come out. And so we just simply set them down into the wire rack like so. And you'll see I've got 3 frames in there. And then we'll take and put the lid on, which essentially just kind of sits on top of there so that you just don't get honey flying all over everything. And the next thing to do is just start turning the crank and spinning. Once it gets spinning, then you can stop turning the crank at a certain point, and then it just sort of spins and slowly comes to a stop. As you can see, it's already starting to slow down a bit. It's not exactly like the salad spinners you may have where you can press a button on the top and make it stop. So we just wait for it to stop spinning on its own accord. But I can take this off and see, coming around. Oh, the smell that comes out of there is just amazing. So fragrant and floral and sweet. This is a kind of catch as catch can honey because it was in our backyard, and that's where most of the pollen and the flower capture came from, was the urban area that we live in. And so even though they got moved to the farm, there's not really that much honey in here that was coming from flowers out there. So we're talking about lots of flowers and trees and stuff from people's backyards in Portland here where we are. And so it's really kind of a mixed bag as far as what the honey is. Sometimes you'll see in the store you can buy, like dedicated blackberry honey or clover honey, so that the bees have been, specifically feeding on that type of plant. But this has got a little bit of everything in it. We couldn't identify anything, but the taste of it is really mild and good, and you could definitely taste a floral kind of taste. So now let's just pull it out and see what we've got. I mean, it's still a little bit heavy, and you can see that the darkness, there's definitely still some stuff in there. So we'll need to spin this pretty hard a few times in order to make sure and get everything out. So we'll do that, and then it'll be 3 down and 7 frames to go. 6 of the frames have been spun, and you can see we're building up a pretty good stockpile there of beeswax for candles and other things. And you see the spent frames over here. Like all good cooks, the place is turning into a mess. But the lightness of the frame and the fact that it gets a little bit translucent, you can kind of see through there, that's your good sign that you've spun all of the honey out. And now we still have 4 frames down in our box to go, but we're going to pause at this point and actually remove some from the stainless steel tub because it's getting fairly full. And so we don't want the last 4 frames that we have, when we put them in there, we don't want them actually sitting down in the honey that we've already spun out, so as not to kind of contaminate it a little bit. So I am going to remove some of the honey through our little spigot here. I've got this just plastic tub. I don't know, what is that? I think maybe it's about a gallon. And I'm just going to turn the little lever. And look at that. There you go. Pure, raw, unadulterated honey. We will do a little bit of straining at some point. We do not treat our bees with any medications, and so these are pure, organic, wild flower honey. All frames have now been spun from their honey and put back into the box, and they are still a bit gooey and sticky from the wax and honey that's kind of residue on there, but we put them in the box and just take them right back out to the bees, and they will have a glory old time cleaning that off. And then we've got a really nice sized bowl full of comb and wax. And so beginning the process now in just a very simple double boiler of melting down that wax. And it'll take a couple of different steps. You kind of do this initial one with the very, very raw stuff that you just cut out of those frames. And then, of course, do it again once you can kind of strain the liquid wax from this first round. And then here is our strainer. You can kind of see a bunch of that golden goodness down there in the bottom. So we will take off the rest of this and put it in our jug. And we're probably going to need to use another jug as well, because I think we're going to get more than a gallon of this. Here is our full gallon of honey, even though we're going to get more. But I just wanted to show you some of the detritus that is floating around in there, which basically is bits of wax from the comb. And so what we will do now is I've got a nice, very fine mesh strainer suspended over a bowl, and we'll give it a good strain before we put it in some jars to store it. And there you have our finished strained honey. We ended up getting almost about 2 gallons worth, so this is a great harvest. And you can see it's a beautiful amber golden color. And then here you can see we've got the beginnings of the melting off of the wax. And so that was boiled basically to get it to liquid form, and now it's going to harden and it'll actually begin to separate so that the wax will be at the top, and then some really purified honey, essentially pasteurized honey, will fall to the bottom. So we'll still be able to capture just a little bit more honey off of this. But hopefully this has been interesting to you. It's great fun for us to do. We've done it a few years now, and we really like keeping our bees. And of course, I mean, honey is one of the oldest foods known to human beings. It's been found in documentation. It's been found as residue in, various pots and containers going all the way back into the ancient world. So of course, my Vikings would have had access to it as well if they could get a hold of some bees in a hive and, learn how to work with that, which, most medieval people knew how to do. And of course, they used it for all different kinds of things. They used it for skin moisturizer. They used it for wound healing, actually. They used it for, of course, fermentation in order to make mead, which we still do now in the modern world. And they also, of course, finally use it as a sweetener. And it has amazing properties to it. You can Google it, like I said earlier. I mean, one of the things that we find is that it helps the gut microbiome. So it's got some great enzymes in it that actually help with digestion. It helps the immune system. It has antibacterial and antiviral qualities to it. And for people who suffer with seasonal allergies, pollen-related allergies, you actually can have a teaspoon or two of honey in your tea or coffee or your yogurt or whatever you eat on a daily basis, and that will help boost your immune system and the allergies that you have generally in the springtime with relation to pollen. So honey is a superfood. It's amazing. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have, remember to like and share and subscribe. And until the next time, when I bring you another video that features food and the past, I bid you farewell. See you later. Sjamst!